All right, we're doing this. Hello. First of all, yes, this is a slightly different setup and slightly different quality because I am filming on my phone. My camera is currently at the studio because we're working on a video project over there. So we're gonna have to use my phone today. Second of all, this is my September-October reading wrap-up, which is late, but it's not going to be a 4-month reading wrap-up like my last two were. This time it's actually going to be a 2-month reading wrap-up, and I will do another 2 months, and then it will be the end of the year. I know how a calendar works. Anyway, so this is my September-October reading wrap-up, but really it is my October reading wrap-up because I didn't read anything new in September. I think when I did my last reading wrap-up, I was working on Colonialism on Trial. I'm pointing at my bed, which is where the book is. I just don't feel like going and getting it. I don't know if this is angled right because I can't see my screen. Anyway, yeah, so that was what I was working on, and I was still working on that throughout September slowly, and I'm actually still working on it now because I took a break to read a bunch of other stuff in October and the beginning of November. So Colonialism on Trial, I mean, I already know it's going to be 5 out of 5 and a must read, and I will need to read it again because it is a lot of important stuff. So I can say that without having quite finished it yet, though I'm almost done. Anyway, let's get to what I read in October. So October was, of course, the exciting month when I was planning to do the FORTNIGHT FRIGHTS readathon. I was very excited about it. I ordered a bunch of books for it. But before that, I went to the library and got a couple of other books. So I still have those library books. I haven't brought them back, which is not good. I will owe a late fee, but it's okay. I just need to remember to take them back, and I have a terrible memory. So the first library book that I read in October was Pet by Akwaeke Emezi, which has been recommended by several booktubers that I follow, so I've had it on my reading list. It is quite brilliant. This is I think it's YA, but I would classify it kind of lower YA, more middle grade fiction. Not in terms of writing quality, it's really well written, just in terms of content, I guess. Okay, you know what? This is getting very frustrating. I have recorded about this book twice and lost the footage both times because I guess my phone ran out of space the first time, and then the second time after I deleted like 65 videos, it still stopped recording for some reason, and I couldn't tell because it was facing the other way. So I'm just gonna use the front-facing camera even though it's not as good quality. I'm sorry, but I want to be able to see if it's still filming so I'm not repeating myself over and over and over again. Anyway, this book is set in our own world in a near future sort of. I'm not sure if the whole world has changed or if it's just this community. It's just talking about Lucille, and I don't know if Lucille is like the city or the state or the country. I'm not sure. It seems smaller than that. It doesn't seem like a whole country. It seems like a city or a county or something like that. And I'm not sure if it's the idea is that the whole world is like Lucille is, or if it's just Lucille that's like it. The thing is that basically monsters have been eradicated from the community. By monsters, I mean bad people. Inherently, people who do bad things, people who abuse power, who are abusive, who are like super greedy and hoard wealth, or who are corrupt, or who are violent, or who are racist, homophobic, etc. All of the things, they don't exist in this community anymore. At least the people don't believe that they exist anymore, because at one point before the main character Jam was born, angels came and helped the activists of the world round up all of the bad people, round up all of the monsters, and put them in rehabilitation centers. Yeah, not bad, right? It's a very interesting concept for a setting, because it's one of those things where you're like, where you just kind of wish sometimes when you hear about all the bad things happening in the world, or you hear about a person doing something horrible, and you think, what if we could make all of those people not be monsters anymore? That's what this book explores, but it also explores the problems after that of the community now not believing that they have eradicated monsters, that it's not possible for people to become monsters still, and Jam facing the fact that there are still people who can do bad things in this community that she has been taught growing up is now basically utopia, if that makes sense. And she is learning about this through her adventures with an angel that arrives, a terrifying angel that comes from her mother's art and says that it is there to hunt. That is there because it has to hunt a monster that is living in her best friend's house. And so she has to help it find this monster. I mean, I wouldn't put it in air quotes. If you're a child abuser, you're a monster. So I'm glad that I read it, and I give it 5 stars. The next book that I read from the library was This Land, 150 Years Retold, compiled by Alicia Elliott. It's not written by her, it is compiled because it is an anthology with stories written by a bunch of different First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people across Canada. And it is a graphic novel, as you can see, that just tells stories from these communities throughout the past 150 years. Stories from within the communities, stories from interactions between Indigenous peoples and colonizers, stories of residential schools and the foster care system. And then the last story, I believe, is a future sort of sci-fi utopia style story about what a good future could be. One of the things I really like about this book is that at the beginning of each story there is a note from the author that talks about why they wrote that story, and then there is a timeline that continues from the first story all the way through to the end of the book. It shows you a timeline of actual events happening in Indigenous communities and between Indigenous communities and colonizers throughout the past 150 years. So you learn a lot just by reading that timeline. I found this entire book really interesting, informative, educational. It's a must read. I will read it again. I plan to buy it and have it in my library so that I can read it again and read it several times, and recommend all of my friends to read it because it is very good. It's a very accessible way to learn these things because it is a graphic novel, and me being someone who finds it very difficult to retain information when I read academic work, I find this sort of format is a lot more accessible, and that means that a lot more people can read it, and a lot more people should read it, in my opinion. I gave it 5 stars, of course. And then after I finished that, it was time to begin FORTNIGHT Frights. So I do have some random vlog footage from the last 2 weeks of October. So I will put that in here. I don't know how much I have. I don't know what it looks like. I think it's a lot of just me reading in pajamas. But I had an interesting experience trying to explore horror, but I don't think much of what I actually read was horror. We'll talk about that after. Anyway, let's just cue that vlog footage now. Alright, hello. I am downtown Toronto for the first time since quarantine. I'm going to be venturing out so I can pick up books. Toronto is in stage 2 again, so I just, wearing a mask, and I'm not going to touch anything, but I am going to go to a bookstore. A day left? I have like 6 or 7 books. That I got. Not remember ordering this. Seance Tea Party. But apparently I ordered that, so I might have to shift my schedule around. Hi! Oh, you're ready for a car ride now? Do you like car rides?
He loves car rides.
Oh, hello. Hello. Hello.
He's like, okay, here we go.
So I finished reading The Blind Owl. and I didn't like it. Hello, it is gonna be loud because I'm driving. So I tried to start my reading vlog yesterday, except it was early. Well, it was like 9 in the morning, but Rebecca and her mom were both still sleeping and I didn't want to wake them up, so I was like talking really quietly, and I don't know if the camera could even hear me. It's been a while since I've done any kind of vlog, and so I'm awkward when I think people can potentially hear me. I started FORTNIGHT FRIGHTS yesterday, and the first day was a little rough, partly because I was at Rebecca's, so I didn't have a lot of time to read, but I did read quite a bit in the morning. I read all of The Blind Owl, which, to be honest, I did not enjoy. I don't know if you're supposed to enjoy that book. I don't think so. I mean, horror, are you supposed to enjoy horror? I don't really know how it works. Anyway, The Blind Owl seems like it's like written like a classic, like it's written like the types of books that you have to read in high school, which is not bad. But the tone of it reminded me of like the way that the character, the narrator talks about fear of death. Sorry, it's raining also. The way the narrator talks about like his relationship with death and everything is just, it reminded me, the tone reminded me a lot of The Metamorphosis short story, which we had to read in my least favorite class in high school, and I absolutely hated that story, so I think that might have thrown me off a little bit. And then the other thing is, like, there's a lot of incest in that story, in the Blind Owl, which always puts me off, obviously. I don't know who would want to read about that. Yeah, other than that, I don't know. It wasn't an interesting story to me, and the thing that I know that some horror books will have stories that are interesting to me, so that's kind of what I'm looking for, and I guess it's kind of an exploration to learn what kind of horror stories and horror books I could enjoy. And The Blind Owl is not one of them. I gave it 3 stars. I feel bad because it's probably exactly what some people like, but star ratings, I have to keep reminding myself, star ratings are about how I feel about it, and how I feel about it is I really didn't like it. Anyway, then I started reading Flowers of Mold, which I decided to just read. I'm not going to read all the stories in it because it is quite a long book, but I'm going to read kind of one per day for like the first week of the readathon, and then see if I want to read any more after that. Yesterday I decided to read the story that the book is named after, Flowers of Mold, which was a mistake because it's a story about garbage and maggots and gross horror, which is not something that I would like to read at all. So if I find that, if that happens in any other story, I'll probably just stop reading it at that point. Like, I won't finish a story that has that kind of content in it again because I cannot do bugs. And it left a gross feeling in my stomach while I was reading it, giving me flashbacks to when I worked in a flower shop with rotten flowers all the time. But then this morning I actually ended up reading the first story in Flowers of Mold, which is called Wax and Wings, and I loved it. Now, it wasn't really what I would consider a horror story. It was sad. It was a story about a narrator who is a second person narrator, actually, which is rare for me to read anyway, who was very small as a child and became an amazing gymnast, and then grew tall, and then was always wanting to fly. Basically, it was like the story is driven by this desire for this person to be able to fly, which is a thing that I have always dreamt of since I was a small child, so it was very relatable. And yeah, I really liked that story a lot, so I will continue to read some other stories from Flowers of Mold and hope that I enjoy them as well. And then I also this morning started reading the Gilda stories. Not quite, I just read the introduction this morning. I meant to read 80 pages of it yesterday to fit in my schedule, but I didn't get to it because instead I started making Rebecca watch Doctor Who, which we ended up watching more episodes than planned because she really liked it. Anyway, so I read the introduction this morning, which makes me a lot more excited about reading this book because at first I was like, all I knew about it was lesbian vampire story and it's set during like slavery. But now I read the introduction and I realized that it's not a classic vampire story, which is what I don't like about vampires. So I'm actually really interested in what she said in the introduction about, or whatever it's called, the forward introduction, anyway, about a lesbian feminist take on vampires as a metaphor for the work, the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into creating actual change in the world. Really, really compelling and made me much more interested in reading the story, so I am excited to continue that story. Alright, I'm going to keep driving now, and I will talk to you later. Finished chapter 1 of Gilda Stories, which is 50 pages long, and so is the next chapter. I wonder if that's how long all of the chapters are. I am intrigued by the way that the vampires work in this world, or at least the way that vampires like Gilda and Bird work in this world. I'm gonna keep reading now. Alright, I am about halfway through. It's Wednesday and I'm about halfway through the Gilda Stories. Meant to be finishing it today. Probably will not finish it today, but that's okay. I am just about to start chapter 4. I am loving it. I think it's this is a book I can already tell I'm going to want to read again. I really like Gilda as a narrator. I really like the narrative style in this book. It's kind of like going back and forth between third person omniscient and third person limited, which is interesting. Like whenever she is with named characters, not always, but often when she's with named characters, you will also get some things from their perspective. But when she's alone or when she's with unnamed characters, it's just from her perspective. I really am intrigued and interested in the retelling of classic vampires in this story. The type of vampire that Gilda is, they take blood only in exchange for giving a gift of some sort to the person that they are taking blood from. They usually look into their dreams and they will give them new dreams, or usually they will look for the thing that that person wants and what that person dreams of and what that person wishes for, and they will give them a push in that direction, but only if it's positive. Which, like, you know, there's always issues of consent when it comes to things like vampires, and that's always going to be a thing that, and I'm interested to see if that ever is addressed in this book. Definitely not addressed in most vampire stories, so but at least they are, because the vampires can read people's minds, the thing that Gilda has done a few times is that if she is taking blood from someone who has bad like intentions, she will give them a thought that will change that, which I don't think is exactly what she was taught. I think that's kind of something that she's doing on her own, and I totally agree with it, but also I don't know if her teachers, Bird and the past Gilda and Sorrel and Anthony, would necessarily agree with it. But now Gilda has met other vampires. She has met the kind that are more like classic vampires, the kind that revel in killing people, that revel in the destruction and the violence of vampirism, being a vampire, rather than it being about life and sharing life and living life and finding connection. So, and she is not being drawn into that, so that's good. Next up, 1955. I did flip through and look at the chapter titles of the rest of the book because I wanted to see how far in time it goes. And it does go to 2020 and then it goes into the future to 2050. So I'm very excited and interested to see what Gilda is up to in the present day and in the near future. Okay, back to reading. Wow, I look great. I can't sit up because this is happening still. Anyway, I am almost done with the Gilda stories. I just finished chapter 6, so the only chapters I have left are 2020 and 2050, so I am very curious to see what happens. I don't know when this book came out, so let me check. So this book came out in 1991, so it'll be interesting to see what she thought about 2020 in 1991 and 2050. It'll be interesting. Anyway, I really like through this book how clear it is as Gilda adapts to the changes of the world around her. Her mannerisms change, the way she talks changes with each new chapter, because she's in a new era of the world, a new era of society. I really like Julius. I'm really glad that the first person she brought into the family worked out so well, because I was worried that it was going to be more tragic. Also, she just met Effie, which was cool. But I am worried about what's going on with Samuel, and it's skipping forward 30 years. So are we going to find out what happened to Samuel or what Samuel did? I guess, hopefully. I don't know. We'll find out. Do I like vampires now? Still no. Still, the exchange scenes make me a little queasy, but we'll see how I feel after the last 2 chapters. Bye. Video phones. Video calling through radio signals? I think. Interesting. Also, the New York Times fell in 2010, apparently. Nobody reads any books except for romance books in 2020, apparently. She didn't foresee the rise of YA, I guess, which who could? Also, this little line, Gilda had hesitated a moment to decide on her direction northward to what had once been called Canada. Now, does that mean that Canada was returned to the Indigenous peoples and is no longer called Canada because of that? Or does it mean that Canada just, like, fell apart and somehow the US outlasted it? She definitely did not predict 2020, but nobody could. So I finished it, and I am feeling a little bit emotional from the last chapter. I definitely liked the 2050 chapter better than the 2020 chapter. The 2020 chapter was just weird because of trying to predict the future stuff. But the 2051 was really good, and the ending, her just going back to her family, is good. It's good, and it made me emotional, and I really, really like this book, and it might end up in my top few books of this year, actually, if not at the top. Onwards to whatever I need to read next. I don't remember. So I promise I did get dressed after my last clip, and I was planning to read a little bit more after that, but then I ended up not doing that. I ended up working on some choreography for the rest of the afternoon, and then I went to work, and then I came back and had a play test, so that's why it's late again. So I haven't read anything since I finished the Guild of Stories, and I don't actually remember what's next on my reading list, so I'm going to look in my handy dandy notebook. October 21st. I was supposed to finish the Guild of Stories, which was yesterday, and start Ride Upon Sticks, but I do not have that book yet. And I was supposed to finish Ride Upon Sticks tomorrow and read The Night Wanderer tomorrow. But I have that other book that is not on my list because I forgot that I ordered it, so I'm going to read that one. Seance Tea Party, which I will hopefully be able to read pretty fast because it is a graphic novel. Also, it's definitely adorable and not horror, so I'm not really getting very far on my horror experience. But I think I am going to read another story from Flowers of Mold first, because that book is horror. At least the one story that I read from it was. The other one wasn't too much, but we'll see. I'll read another story from that before I start this, and I will try to finish this tomorrow. And I will try to read the whole of The Night Wanderer also tomorrow. I have a little bit more time tomorrow because it's Friday. I have a lot more time tomorrow because it's Friday. So I can't film clips when I'm reading Flowers of Mold because it is an ebook that I'm reading on my phone. So just trust that I'm reading it. Okay, I read another story from Flowers of Mold. I read The Woman Next Door, which did unnerve me. It's a story from the perspective of a woman who has a husband and child and lives in an apartment building, and the woman who moves in next door, like, psychologically messes with her by, like, stealing things but then saying she didn't steal anything, and, like, kind of tricking her into thinking she's losing her memory until she kind of loses it at the end. But it kind of like trailed off at the end. It didn't really have a clear ending, so I don't really know, but it did unnerve me. Is that horror? I thought she was like a brownie at first, like fairy. That was just wishful thinking. I'm gonna start reading Seance Tea Party now, and then I'll get back to more horror tomorrow, probably. Okay, this book is so freaking cute. I can't handle it. Look at this. Just look at this. What? It's so cute. Also, I've already like almost read half the book. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna read it fast. I should go to bed. Good morning. It's time to finish reading Seance Tea Party. I am halfway through. I am almost crying because it's so sweet and so sad. Alexa the ghost is talking to her childhood best friend, who is an old lady now, and telling her to never stop growing old and to cherish it. Ah, precious. So adorable and so sad. I finished it. Can you see that I was crying? The last like 2 or 3 chapters just had me sobbing, so this is definitely going to be a reread. And holy, it's so like such a simple story, But the illustrations are so adorable and the story is so sweet and tragic. I loved it. I'm so glad I got this. I totally forgot that I had ordered it, but I'm so glad I did. Because now I own it and I can read it again whenever I want. Oh. It's a story all about not wanting to grow up and lose the magic of childhood, but learning that you can grow up and not lose the magic. But also about a ghost learning to be ready to move on. It's so sweet. But now I have to get back to some actual horror. I believe I am going to be reading the entirety of The Night Wanderer today. That was next on my list. Here it is. It's very short, so I should be able to read the whole thing today. And I might also read another story from Flowers of Mold. I am halfway through The Night Wanderer. Just got to chapter 14. And it is creepy. Yeah. Stranger is creepy, obviously, and creepy things are happening. And they have introduced us to multiple random people in the reserve, which makes me think that those people are in danger. So we'll see what happens. So far, just creepy. Good morning. I did end up finishing The Night Wanderer last night, even though I got distracted and started watching a dance documentary that just dropped on Netflix yesterday, which is really good, but I got distracted and I didn't start reading this until just before midnight. But I still read 100 pages last night, so I must have been reading really fast. Anyway, I finished it and I really liked the ending. I was not expecting this. I really appreciate that you saw the Night Wanderer's perspective throughout the book. You saw his perspective. You saw other characters' perspectives. Also, it wasn't just Tiffany and the Wanderer. There were other characters that we saw their perspectives. But I really liked that you saw his perspective and his memories. Also, he was called Owl when he was a child before he became the Night Wanderer. So there's another owl theme that I didn't realize when I was choosing the books that I was going to read for this readathon. Anyway, I really liked this story. It got creepy in the middle, which I think is why I started reading it so much faster. I did get worried a couple of times that the Night Wanderer was going to kill someone or had killed someone. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. And it's just about him coming home and performing the proper ceremonies to end his wandering. It's actually a kind of a beautiful ending. And once again, not horror. So at some point I'll read horror, I guess. I mean, I did read 2 horror things right at the very beginning of this readathon. The Blind Owl, which I hated, and that one story in Flowers and Mold. And I guess the story that I read in Flowers and Mold the other day was also a horror story. I don't know, what is horror? And what is thriller? This is definitely more thriller. Also, this book that made me cry yesterday, which I already talked about, but oh my goodness, this might be my favorite. Okay, anyway. I am planning to read the entirety of Ivywood Manor today, which is the Hawaiian Gothic horror novel, which I'm excited to read. But before I do that, I have a Potternaut recording today, so I have to read 3 chapters of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, so I'm going to do that first. So I won't be reading Ivywood Manor until this afternoon, so I'll catch up with you then. Hello! So Potternaut recording was postponed because E is not feeling well. So since I had time, I went to the frog pond and got a tea latte. This is pear white chocolate tea latte and banana bread. Yay. This means that I now have more time to read today, which is excellent. And I don't have to finish the Harry Potter chapters that I was going to finish. So my plan for today is to update my reading journal because I haven't actually put in any of the books that I finished yet. So I'm going to do that. and then I'm going to read the entirety of Ivywood Manor, which is not even 200 pages, so that will be easy. And if I finish it, we'll also read another story, Flowers of Mold, and hopefully have time to work on my game a little bit. I finished reading Ivywood Manor, and I have a question. Is horror always super depressing? I mean, probably, because it usually has to do with death. At least it wasn't as depressing as I thought it was going to be, because I thought, should I spoil things? I don't know if I should be spoiling things. I won't spoil things. It was slightly less depressing than I thought partway through it was going to be, but it was still depressing and was like horrible in what happened, but also not super. There was no mystery to it. Like, I think there was supposed to. No, I don't really think there was supposed to be any mystery to it. It was pretty obvious what was happening the whole time. So I don't know, but I enjoyed it. It feels like this book feels like a kind of a combination of like the energy of A Secret Garden, especially when like the early parts of A Secret Garden, especially when Mr. Van Kirk started getting sick, and the way that he was treated when he was ill by the doctor reminded me a lot of Colin in The Secret Garden. The overall plot also had vibes of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Not nearly as delightful as that book. This one is a sinister tragedy, whereas in Northanger Abbey, the protagonist, Catherine, just thinks that there could have been a sinister tragedy and is incorrect. But yeah, it kind of had vibes of those, I guess, because it's a Gothic book. That's what the storyline is like. That's what the like atmosphere is like. So because I like both of those books, it made me like this one a little bit more. I did not approve of one of the deaths that happened because they could have been so happy. But you know what? It's not supposed to be happy. I'm sure it is not supposed to be happy. So once again, I'm questioning, what is horror? Is this horror? Is horror supposed to be depressing always? Is horror inherently depressing, I guess? I guess it must be, right? Or is it just me that finds it depressing? Or is it even horror? I am just confused. I don't think it is horror. It doesn't say it's horror, it just says it's a Gothic novella. And Gothic doesn't necessarily mean horror, unless it says Gothic horror, which this does not. That was the end of the first week of Fortnight Frights, and then I didn't read anything for like 5 days, and then I read The Owls Have Come to Take Us Away by Ronald L. Smith, which is a middle grade alien horror story, alien abduction horror story. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was an alien abduction story. And this one I entirely based off of the title. I was like, ooh, I like owls. Let's see some spooky owls. That sounds fun. There's no owls in this book. It's about aliens, and it's just about generic aliens and generic person being abducted by aliens for testing. It just feels like a very, very generic alien abduction story. I didn't particularly like it. I'm sure it would be fun for a middle grade reader to read who didn't know anything about alien abduction tropes and conspiracy theories, but having been a person who has lived in the world for 28 years, it just felt very basic, which probably just means it wasn't for me. So that's that. Those are all the books that I read for Fortnight Frights. Do I have a conclusion? Did I learn anything about horror books? Not really, except that I don't like existential horror and I don't like gross garbage horror. Maybe I'll try again another time. I don't know if I will, though. I don't know if I really need that in my life. it was still fun to do the readathon, and I'm glad that I did it, and I'm glad that I read books that I wouldn't have read otherwise. And that's all I have to say about that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye!